Today, we're going to break down a really forceful theological argument against the way the Vatican is currently approaching interfaith dialogue. Our source is a broadcast from a traditional Catholic figure, Mother Miriam, and we're going to deconstruct her perspective piece by piece. All right, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the listener's question that gets this whole conversation started. Then we'll dive into the speaker's pretty blunt rejection of the Vatican's actions and explore what she calls false unity. After that, we'll look at her definition of true ecumenism, and finally, we'll see how she connects all of this to a much broader pattern of concern.
So every big argument has to start somewhere, right? And this one all begins with a really direct and heartfelt question from a listener who is just trying to make sense of what they're seeing from their church.
At the very heart of this is a listener who is just confused. They write in, and they list out some major theological differences. The nature of God, whether Christ is divine, and they can't square that with the Vatican's outreach. The phrase that just sums it all up is, "It baffles my mind." And that sense of bewilderment really sets the stage for everything that follows. So how do you answer that kind of bewilderment? Well, the response we're about to see is immediate, and it is completely uncompromising. This is where we get into a total rejection of the very foundation of the Vatican's actions.
Yeah, there's absolutely no hesitation here. Mother Miriam's first response is to say that this entire policy is, from her perspective, just plain wrong in a divine sense. She even says that this approach doesn't just baffle believers, but it must baffle God's mind too. I mean, that's a really powerful way to open, framing the whole thing in absolute spiritual terms. And this quote right here shows you just how incredibly high she thinks the stakes are. We're not talking about a simple policy disagreement. The language is so stark, so severe. She's essentially equating this type of interfaith unity with a spiritual union with evil itself. It's a statement that leaves zero room for interpretation.
Okay, so why? Why take such an incredibly strong stance? To really get that, we have to look at the core of her theological argument, and it all comes down to the concept of unity itself and what makes it either real or, in her view, dangerously false. Now, this is a really important point. She isn't accusing the Pope of having bad intentions. In fact, she grants that he has a sincere desire for so-called unity. But, and this is the absolute key to her argument, she believes the sincere desire is being channeled into a fundamentally flawed and even dangerous idea of what unity really means. This slide really breaks down her whole argument. For Mother Miriam, you've basically got two types of unity. Over on the left, you have unity without truth. She says this is basically a counterfeit, something that she says is not unity at all and is actually leading everybody to hell. Then on the right, you've got unity with truth. Now that, for her, is the real thing. That's the path that leads to life. So you see, for her, truth isn't just a part of the equation. It's the one ingredient that decides if unity is a good thing or a spiritual poison. Okay, so if the current way of thinking about unity is broken, what's the alternative? Well, she doesn't just critique the situation. She actually offers a very specific and what she sees as corrective vision for how interfaith engagement ought to be done. And here is her solution. She defines true ecumenism not as everyone getting together to affirm each other's beliefs. Instead, she sees it as a missionary act. The goal, in her view, is singular: to bring them to the truth of Christ, not to leave them in their errors. It's a really active model of engagement that's aimed squarely at conversion. Now, from where the speaker is standing, this issue with Islam isn't some isolated incident. She presents it as just one piece of the puzzle in what she views as a much larger and deeply troubling pattern of behavior. Here's how she connects the dots to build her case. She starts with the embrace of Islam, but then she pivots to the Pope congratulating the Archbishop of Canterbury, and she's very specific here, pointing out that the Archbishop is a woman, which goes against Catholic doctrine on the priesthood, and that she supports abortion. For Mother Miriam, these aren't separate things. They're all symptoms of the same underlying problem, which leads her to say it's all a heartbreak, and an example no one should follow. And just to make sure everyone understands the gravity of her position, she uses the strongest language she can. The word abomination is a term loaded with theological condemnation. Choosing that word signals that in her mind, this isn't just breaking with tradition, it's a profound moral and spiritual offense. So to wrap this all up, the argument we've just taken apart is really built on this clear, unyielding foundation. It's a worldview where truth is absolute, and any kind of unity that compromises that truth isn't just ineffective, it's a dangerous detour that leads people away from God. And this whole thing leaves us with a really big question. one that goes way beyond this one broadcast. As our world gets more and more connected, what is the right role for that kind of deep, unwavering religious conviction when we're trying to have a dialogue with people from other faiths? It's a massive challenge, and one that so many people are grappling with today.